Well, the first memorable event I remember on 12th and 61st was painting the steeple on the outside of the church. My dad and Burl Sparks and Matty Anderson rigged up a rope with the seat on it. And I was the one sitting on the seat that they would push out to paint the outside of the steeple.
My most memorable thing at the church on 61st Street was when Dick and I got married 63 years ago. And we did our vows underneath an arch that was covered with live roses. And that was really classy in those days.
The old church on 61st when I was baptized. When you come up out of the water, you felt like a load lifted, you know, you're floating on a cloud, you know.
Well, 61st Street, I got married there 60 years ago. My father-in-law was the minister at that particular time.
I was married in April of 1964 in the church on 75th Street. My wife Joanne was baptized on April of 1955, the same day I was in the church on 61st Street.
And on 75th, I think the most memorable thing that I did a lot of things at the church on 75th, but probably the most memorable thing was baptizing my 3 granddaughters.
There are a lot of changes between being in the city and then coming out here, but I think the biggest one is in town I knew everybody. We all knew one another, and that's okay. Well, then we moved out here, we have 2 services, we don't always know everybody. But you know, that's how Jesus wants us. He wants us to grow, so that's perfectly okay. But everybody is friendly here, always.
I would say one of the biggest changes I've seen is the dress code. When I started going to this church, everybody wore suits and white shirts and ties. And I remember having a board meeting because one of the elders wore a colored dress shirt.
Like families, the church has a budget, and I think money, particularly on 61st Street, I remember times we couldn't pay the minister. Things were really rough, and then it got better as we move over to 75th Street, and it's fantastic since we moved out here.
Well, I think the biggest struggle we had when I was involved was right after we built the building on 75th and 32nd. We had some slim years there, and but there was about 5 or 6 gentlemen in the church that were all on the board in one capacity or the other, and said to me, if you ever run short, give me a buzz. And many times during those first couple years, we called on them and we never went behind on anything.
I think Brian Henry's the one that influenced me most. My father-in-law was a minister at the time, so we were close, you know.
The people that influenced me most were my parents. They were strict. For instance, if I went to a party on Saturday night, you get up and you go to church Sunday morning. That was the rule. And also, as we became young adults and Dick and I in our early marriage, I believe Don Leach, our minister at that time, he was great, and so was his wife.
I think George Roberts, when I was probably the right age and I was most interested in what was happening and how it was working, he was the minister, and he was a very dynamic minister, and I learned a lot from him.
Steve and Helen Ernest, they were ministers, and his wife, she was a Sunday school teacher. She used to have a saying, you know, we can't judge people, but we can fruit inspect.